The rain came down in sheets so thick that Garrett Keller could barely see the oak tree 20 paces from his trading post's front window. And when the door swung open with a gust of wind and wet leaves, he looked up from his ledger to find an orc woman standing in his doorway, soaked through to the skin and shivering despite the obvious strength in her frame. She was not what most humans expected when they thought of orcs. Where the old war stories spoke of hulking warriors and brutal raiders, Calla Whitestone stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, her build slender and graceful in a way that reminded Garrett of the willow trees along the creek behind his store. Her green skin was darker where the rain had plastered her black hair against her cheeks, and her small tusks barely protruded past her upper lip. Her pointed ears were pressed flat against her head, whether from the cold or embarrassment he could not tell. Come in, Garrett said, rising quickly and grabbing a wool blanket from the shelf behind the counter. You will catch your death standing there. She stepped inside, her boots squelching on the wooden floor, and accepted the blanket with a quiet word of thanks. Her voice was low and musical, nothing like the guttural growl most humans in the borderlands expected from her kind. I apologize for the mess, she said, looking down at the puddle forming around her feet. The storm came up faster than I anticipated. Storms do that in these hills, Garrett replied, moving to stoke the fire in the pot-bellied stove that heated the main room of his trading post. Let me take your coat. It will dry faster near the heat. She hesitated for just a moment before unwrapping the heavy oilskin coat from her shoulders. The garment was well made but old, patched in several places with careful stitches. Garrett took it from her hands and felt immediately that something was wrong with the weight distribution. The coat hung heavier on one side, and as he turned it to drape over the drying rack he had built near the stove, he felt the unmistakable crinkle of paper in the lining. Calla had turned away to look at his shelves of dry goods, her attention apparently caught by a display of imported tea tins. Garrett knew he should simply hang the coat and say nothing. He knew that whatever was hidden in that lining was none of his business. But his curiosity had always been his weakness, and his fingers found the small tear in the interior pocket before his better judgment could stop them. The letter was folded small and tight, the paper expensive and heavy. Garrett unfolded it with movements he would later be unable to explain or justify, and his eyes caught on just 2 words written in a firm, flowing script before his conscience caught up with his hands. Forget him. Something hot and sharp twisted in Garrett's chest. He did not read further. He did not need to. Those 2 words told him everything he needed to know about the shape of the situation. And before he could think about what he was doing or why, he had opened the door of the stove and thrust the letter into the flames. The paper caught immediately, curling and blackening, and Garrett watched it burn with a grim satisfaction that surprised him. He had known Calla for 3 months now. She had started coming to his trading post in late spring, making the journey from her family's homestead in the high valleys to purchase supplies and occasionally sell the beautiful woven cloth her people produced. At first, their conversations had been brief and transactional, but gradually they had lengthened into discussions about weather and crops, books and philosophy. The small observations about life that 2 lonely people exchange when they discover an unexpected kinship. Garrett had not allowed himself to name what he felt for her. He was 32 years old, a former soldier who had taken his mustering out pay and bought this struggling trading post 5 years ago. He had seen enough of war and hatred to last several lifetimes, and he had chosen this remote location precisely because it sat on the border between human and orc territories, a place where both peoples came to trade and where the old animosities were, if not forgotten, at least set aside for the sake of commerce. He had noticed the way Calla's eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled. He had noticed the graceful movements of her long, fingered hands when she examined his merchandise. He had noticed that she always found a reason to linger, to ask one more question, to mention something she had been thinking about since her last visit. And he had noticed, with a growing warmth that both frightened and exhilarated him, that he looked forward to her visits with an intensity that went far beyond the value of her business. But he had not said anything. How could he? The prejudice against orcs ran deep in human society, and the prejudice against humans ran equally deep among orc clans. A relationship between them would be complicated at best, dangerous at worst. So Garrett had kept his feelings locked away and told himself that friendship was enough. Now, watching that letter burn, he realized that someone else had noticed. Someone who wanted Calla to forget him. Someone who thought their connection was dangerous enough to intervene. The hell with that. Garrett turned from the stove to find Calla watching him with an expression he could not quite read. Her dark eyes were wide, and one hand was pressed against her chest, against the leather satchel she carried slung across her body. "Garrett," she said slowly, "what did you just burn?" He crossed the room to her in 3 long strides, and before he could second-guess himself, before he could remember all the reasons why this was a terrible idea, he took her hands in his. They were cold from the rain, but strong, and they trembled slightly in his grip. Up close he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the small scar above her left eyebrow, the exact shade of green in her skin that deepened to olive in the shadows and brightened to almost jade in the firelight. "Whatever it was," Garrett said quietly, "whoever sent it, the answer is no." Calla's breath caught. "You read it. Only 2 words. Forget him. And I am assuming," he continued, tightening his grip on her hands when she tried to pull away, "that the him in question is me." She was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. Then, very quietly, she said, "My mother sent it. I found it in my coat pocket this morning before I left. I did not read it until I was halfway here, and when I did, I almost turned back." "Why did you not?" Garrett asked. "Because," Calla said, and now there were tears in her eyes, bright and fierce, "because she has never met you. Because she decided you were beneath our family based on nothing but her own prejudice and fear. Because I am tired of letting other people's hatred dictate my life." Garrett felt something loosen in his chest, some knot he had been carrying for months without realizing it. "I am tired of it too," he said. "I am tired of pretending I do not count the days between your visits. I am tired of acting like my heart does not beat faster when I hear your voice. I am tired of being afraid of what other people will think." "Garrett," Calla whispered, and there was wonder in her voice mixed with the tears. "I thought I was alone in this. I thought I was foolish for hoping." He pulled her close then, wrapping his arms around her and holding her against his chest while she shook with cold and emotion and relief. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked beneath his chin, her arms coming up to circle his waist. He could feel her heart beating against his ribs, fast and strong, and he pressed his face into her damp hair and breathed in the scent of rain and wool and something uniquely her, something green and alive like the forest after a storm. "You are not foolish," he said into her hair. "And you are not alone." They stood like that for a long time, while the rain continued to hammer against the roof, and the fire crackled in the stove and Calla's coat steamed gently on the drying rack. Gradually, Garrett felt the trembling in her body subside, replaced by a different kind of tension, something warm and aware. When Calla finally pulled back far enough to look up at him, her eyes were still wet, but she was smiling. It was a small, uncertain smile, but it lit her face from within in a way that made Garrett's breath catch. "What do we do now?" she asked. Now, Garrett said, reaching up to brush a strand of wet hair from her cheek. Now we figure this out together. But first, I think we need to get you properly warm and dry. You can change in the back room. I have some clean clothes that might fit you well enough, and we can hang your dress by the fire with your coat. Calla nodded, still looking a bit dazed, and Garrett reluctantly released her. He found her a shirt and trousers that had belonged to a customer who had left them in trade for supplies, along with thick wool socks and a knitted shawl. While she changed in the small room he used for storage and occasional sleeping when the weather was too bad to make the walk to his cabin up the hill, Garrett made tea and tried to organize his thoughts. He had just declared himself to an orc woman whose mother wanted her to forget him. He had burned a letter that was not his to burn. He had stepped over a line that most people in both their communities would say should never be crossed. And he found, somewhat to his surprise, that he had no regrets whatsoever. When Calla emerged from the back room, swimming slightly in the oversized clothes but looking infinitely more comfortable, Garrett handed her a cup of hot tea sweetened with honey and gestured to the 2 chairs he kept near the stove for customers who wanted to warm themselves. "Tell me about your mother," he said as they settled into the chairs. Calla wrapped her hands around the teacup and stared into the dark liquid for a moment before speaking. "Her name is Mara Whitestone. She is the matriarch of our clan, which means she is responsible for the welfare and honor of everyone who bears the Whitestone name. She is strong, intelligent, stubborn as a mountain, and absolutely convinced that humans cannot be trusted." "That is not an uncommon view among orcs," Garrett observed carefully. "We did fight a war within living memory." "We did," Calla agreed. "And my mother lost her brother in that war, killed by human soldiers in a battle over a border settlement that no longer even exists. She has carried that grief and anger for 30 years. I understand why she feels the way she does. But understanding her reasons does not mean I have to live by her fears." "How old are you?" Garrett asked, realizing he had never actually known. 24, Calla said. "Old enough to make my own choices according to our customs. But in practice, defying the matriarch's wishes is not something that is done lightly in an orc clan. Family is everything to us. Loyalty, duty, honor, these are not just words. They are the foundation of our entire society." Garrett leaned back in his chair, thinking. "So if we pursue this," he said slowly, "if we choose to be together, you will be going against your mother's direct wishes. That could have serious consequences for you within your clan." "It could," Calla admitted. "She could disown me. She could forbid the other clan members from associating with me. In the worst case, she could declare me outcast, which would mean I would be clan-less, without family or status." She took a sip of her tea and met his eyes over the rim of the cup. "But she could also come around. My mother is stubborn, but she is not unreasonable. If she could be made to see that you are a good man, that you respect our ways and our people, that you make me happy, there is a chance she would accept it. A small chance, but a chance." "Then that is what we need to do," Garrett said. "We need to show her that I am worthy of you." Calla's smile this time was wider, more confident. "You realize that is a very orc way of thinking about it. Among my people, when a man wants to marry a woman, he must prove himself to her family. He must show that he can provide, that he understands their customs, that he honors their traditions. It is not enough to love her, he must demonstrate that he is worthy to join the clan." "Then teach me," Garrett said simply. "Teach me what I need to know. I am a quick learner and I am motivated." "Garrett," Calla said, and now her voice was serious, "my mother will not make this easy. When she finds out I ignored her letter, she will come here herself. She will test you. She will look for any weakness, any sign that you are not sincere. She will be harsh and demanding and utterly uncompromising. Are you prepared for that? Garrett thought about the battles he had fought, the friends he had lost, the long years of loneliness since he had left the army and tried to build a new life on the frontier. He thought about the way Calla's laugh sounded when he said something that surprised her. He thought about the intelligence in her eyes and the gentle strength in her hands and the way she made him want to be a better man than he had been. "Yes," he said, "I am prepared. For you, Calla Whitestone, I will face your mother and your entire clan if necessary. I will learn your customs and prove myself by your standards, and I will not give up until I have earned the right to stand beside you." Calla set down her teacup and reached across the small space between their chairs to take his hand. Her grip was firm and warm now, all traces of the cold rain gone. "Then we have work to do," she said, "and not much time. My mother will have expected me to turn around the moment I read that letter. When I arrive home tonight without having done so, she will know I defied her. I would estimate we have perhaps a week before she comes to the trading post to confront you herself." "A week," Garrett repeated. "What can you teach me in a week?" "Enough," Calla said. "Enough to keep you from making a complete fool of yourself, at least. The rest will depend on your ability to think quickly and your willingness to humble yourself before a woman who will not be inclined to like you." Garrett grinned. "When you put it like that, it sounds almost fun." Calla laughed, and the sound filled the trading post with warmth that had nothing to do with the fire in the stove. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Garrett Keller." "Probably both," Garrett admitted, "but I am also very determined." "So when do we start?" "Now," Calla said, rising from her chair and pulling him up with her. "We start now. The rain shows no sign of stopping and you have no other customers. We might as well make use of the time." For the rest of that afternoon and into the evening, while the storm raged outside and the light faded from gray to black beyond the windows, Calla taught Garrett the basics of orc clan customs. She explained the importance of matriarchal lineage, how inheritance and status passed through the female line, and how mothers held the final authority in all family matters. She taught him the proper way to greet an orc elder, with both palms placed over the heart and a slight bow that acknowledged their status without being servile. She explained the ritual of courtship, which involved a series of formal visits during which the suitor brought gifts not to the woman herself, but to her family. The gifts had to demonstrate practical value and personal thought, not mere wealth. Any fool with coin could buy expensive items, but only a man who truly understood the woman and her family would know what gifts would be meaningful to them. "So what does your family value?" Garrett asked, leaning against the counter while Calla paced the room, her hands moving expressively as she spoke. "My mother values strength, but not the physical kind," Calla said. "She values strength of character, the ability to stand firm in one's convictions while still being flexible enough to listen and learn. She values cleverness and resourcefulness. She values honest work done well, and she values family loyalty above all else." "Those are not easy things to demonstrate in a series of short visits," Garrett observed. "No," Calla agreed. "Which is why most courtships among my people last at least a full season, sometimes longer. The suitor becomes part of the family's daily life, helping with chores, sharing meals, proving through his actions that he is reliable and trustworthy." "We do not have a season," Garrett said. "We have a week, maybe 2 if we are lucky." "Then we will have to be creative," Calla said. She stopped pacing and looked at him with an expression that was part calculation, part mischief. "Tell me, how good are you at fixing things?" "Very good," Garrett said. "I spent 5 years in the army maintaining equipment and another 5 running this trading post. If it can be fixed, I can usually figure out how." Good. Because our family's water mill has been running poorly for the past month, and no one has been able to determine why. If you could fix it, that would be a significant demonstration of your practical skills. I can certainly try, Garrett said. What else? Can you cook? Garrett laughed. I can keep myself from starving, but I would not call myself a cook. Then I will teach you to make stone bread, Calla said. It is a traditional orc recipe, and if you can present my mother with a decent loaf that you made with your own hands, she will be impressed despite herself. They spent the next hour working in Garrett's small kitchen area at the back of the trading post. Calla showed him how to mix the dense, hearty bread dough that was a staple of orc households, made with stone-ground wheat flour, ground nuts, dried fruit, and a mix of spices that gave it a warm, complex flavor. The dough had to be kneaded for a long time to develop the right texture, and Garrett quickly discovered that the rhythm of pushing and folding was oddly meditative. As they worked side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing, their hands sometimes touching when they reached for the same ingredient, Garrett found himself acutely aware of Calla's presence in a way that went beyond simple attraction. There was an intimacy to this domestic scene that touched something deep in his chest, something he had not even realized he was hungry for. He had been alone for so long, ever since his parents had died when he was 17, and he had joined the army rather than try to manage their failing farm by himself. He had grown used to solitude, even convinced himself he preferred it. But now, watching Calla laugh as she corrected his kneading technique, feeling the warmth of her body beside his, smelling the mingled scents of bread and spices and the lingering rain in her hair, he realized how much he had been missing. "You are smiling," Calla observed, glancing up at him. "I am happy," Garrett said simply. "This is nice. Being here with you, learning these things, it feels right." Calla's expression softened, and she paused in her work to brush a dusting of flour from his cheek with her fingertips. The touch was gentle, almost hesitant, and it sent a shiver through Garrett that had nothing to do with the temperature. "It does feel right," she said quietly. "I have imagined this, you know. What it might be like to share a kitchen with you, to teach you my people's ways, to build something together. But I always told myself it was just a fantasy, that it could never really happen." "It is happening," Garrett said, catching her hand and holding it against his face for a moment longer. "We are making it happen. Together." "Together," Calla repeated, and then she rose on her toes and kissed him, a quick soft press of lips that was over almost before it began but which left Garrett's heart racing. When she pulled back, her green skin had darkened slightly with what Garrett realized was a blush, and her tusks caught the lamplight as she smiled. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," she admitted. "Only weeks," Garrett teased. "I have wanted to do this for months." He leaned down and kissed her properly this time, one hand coming up to cradle the back of her head while the other settled on her waist. She made a small sound of surprise and pleasure and melted against him, her flour-dusted hands gripping his shoulders. The kiss deepened, became something warm and searching and full of promise, and when they finally broke apart they were both breathing hard. "We should finish the bread," Calla said, but she did not move away from him. "We should," Garrett agreed, but he kissed her again anyway, a series of small kisses across her cheeks and the bridge of her nose and the corner of her mouth, making her laugh. Eventually, they did finish the bread and set it to rise in a warm spot near the stove. By then it was fully dark outside and the rain had settled into a steady drumming rhythm. Calla looked out the window with a small frown. "I should go home," she said. "The path will be difficult in the dark, but I can manage it." "Or," Garrett said carefully, "you could stay here. I have the back room and I can sleep out here by the stove. It would be safer than traveling in the dark during a storm." Calla bit her lip, considering. If I do not come home tonight, my mother will worry. She will be angry that I defied her, but she will still worry. Is there a way to send her a message? Our neighbor has a daughter who often carries messages between households. If I could get word to her, she could tell my mother that I am safe and will return in the morning. Then we will do that, Garrett said. We can walk to your neighbor's homestead together. It cannot be more than a few miles from here, can it? 3 miles, Calla said. But in this weather, we will both get wet, and then we will come back here and dry off by the fire again, Garrett said firmly. I am not letting you walk home alone in the dark, and I am not letting you go at all until we have made sure your mother knows you are safe. Come on, your coat should be dry enough by now. Calla looked at him for a long moment, and then she smiled, a full, radiant smile that made Garrett's breath catch. You are going to be good at this, she said. The courtship thing, I mean. You already think like an orc man, putting the family's peace of mind ahead of convenience. Or maybe I just think like a man who cares about you, Garrett said, but he was pleased by the compliment all the same. They bundled into their coats and took a lantern from the hook by the door. The rain was cold but not freezing, and the path Calla led him along was well maintained despite the weather. They walked close together, the lantern swinging between them, and talked about inconsequential things: the trading post's business, the progress of Calla's weaving projects, the possibility that the storm might last through tomorrow. The neighbor's homestead was a sturdy orc dwelling built of stone and timber, with smoke rising from the central chimney and warm light glowing in the windows. Calla knocked on the door, and it was opened by a young orc woman, perhaps 16 or 17 years old, with the same green skin and small tusks but a rounder face and shorter stature than Calla. "Calla," the girl exclaimed, "what are you doing out in this weather?" "And who is?" She stopped abruptly, her eyes going wide as she took in Garrett standing beside Calla. "Della, this is Garrett Keller," Calla said calmly. "He runs the trading post at the crossroads. Garrett, this is Della Ironfoot. Her family has the homestead adjacent to ours." "Pleased to meet you," Garrett said, executing the gesture Calla had taught him earlier, palms over his heart and a slight bow. Della's mouth opened and closed a few times, and then she called over her shoulder, "Mother, you need to come see this." An older orc woman appeared behind Della, wiping her hands on an apron. She took one look at the scene on her doorstep, and her eyebrows rose nearly to her hairline. "Calla Whitestone," she said slowly, "does your mother know you are standing on my doorstep with a human man at this hour?" "That is actually what I came to talk to you about," Calla said. "May we come in for a moment?" They were ushered into a warm, comfortable kitchen that smelled of roasting meat and vegetables. Della's mother, who introduced herself as Nora Ironfoot, offered them tea and seats at the kitchen table, though her expression remained carefully neutral as she studied Garrett. Calla explained the situation with admirable directness. She told Nora about her mother's letter, about her decision to defy it, about her relationship with Garrett and their intention to court formally. She asked if Della might be willing to take a message to Mara Whitestone, letting her know that Calla was safe and would return home in the morning. Nora listened to all of this without interrupting, her dark eyes moving between Calla and Garrett with an intensity that made Garrett feel like he was being measured and weighed. When Calla finished speaking, there was a long silence. "You understand," Nora finally said, directing her words to Garrett, "that what you are proposing is not a simple matter. Mara Whitestone is not a woman to cross lightly. She is well respected among our people, and her opinions carry weight. If she opposes this match, she will not be the only one." "I understand," Garrett said, "and I understand that I will need to prove myself worthy not just to Mara but to the entire clan. I am prepared to do that." Prepared and able are two different things, Nora said. What do you know of our customs, our ways? Very little, Garrett admitted. But I am learning. Calla has been teaching me, and I will continue to learn. I will work to understand your people and honor your traditions. I am asking for the chance to try. Nora's expression softened slightly. At least you are honest about your ignorance. That is better than some who would pretend to knowledge they do not possess. She turned to Calla. You are certain about this. Once your mother arrives to confront him, there will be no taking it back. Your relationship will be known to the entire clan, and you will face judgment from many quarters. I am certain, Calla said, and her voice was steady. I have given this a great deal of thought, Nora. This is not a rash decision or a rebellion for its own sake. I care for Garrett, and I believe he cares for me. I believe we can build something good together if we are given the chance. Then I will send the message, Nora said. Della can go first thing in the morning before the household is fully awake. It will give Mara time to prepare herself before she confronts you both. She looked at Garrett again, and this time there was something almost like sympathy in her eyes. I hope you know what you are in for, young man. Mara Whitestone can be as fierce as a winter storm when she chooses. I have weathered storms before, Garrett said. Not like this one, Nora said, but she was almost smiling as she said it. The walk back to the trading post felt shorter than the walk out had been, perhaps because Garrett's mind was racing with thoughts of what was to come. A week at most before Calla's mother arrived to test him. 7 days to prepare for the most important challenge of his life. But as they reached the trading post and Garrett helped Calla out of her wet coat for the second time that night, he found he was not afraid. Nervous, yes. Uncertain of exactly how things would unfold, absolutely. But not afraid. Because Calla was worth whatever trials lay ahead, and because for the first time in years, he felt like he was fighting for something that truly mattered. They checked the bread dough, which had risen beautifully, and Garrett shaped it into a round loaf while Calla watched and offered corrections. They placed it in the oven he had built into the side of the stove, and while it baked they sat together on the cushioned bench. Garrett kept for customers who wanted to examine merchandise at their leisure. Calla leaned against his shoulder, and Garrett wrapped an arm around her, marveling at how natural it felt to hold her like this. They talked quietly about the days ahead, making plans and strategies. Calla would visit each day, teaching him more about orc customs and helping him prepare gifts for her family. Garrett would work on fixing the water mill, and Calla would arrange for him to visit the Whitestone homestead under the guise of making the repair, which would give him a chance to meet some of the other clan members before the formal confrontation with Mara. You have siblings? Garrett asked. 2 brothers, Calla said. Older than me, both married with children of their own. They are good men, but they will follow my mother's lead in this. If she opposes you, they will as well. If she accepts you, they will welcome you into the family. No pressure then, Garrett said dryly, and Calla laughed. None at all, she agreed. When the bread was done, they pulled it from the oven and set it to cool. The smell that filled the trading post was incredible, rich and nutty and sweet all at once. Garrett felt a small surge of pride at having made something so traditional and meaningful under Calla's guidance. It looks perfect, Calla said, examining the loaf with a critical eye. The crust is the right color, the texture looks good. When it cools, we will cut into it to check the inside, but I think you have done well for a first attempt. I had a good teacher, Garrett said. They cut the bread once it had cooled enough, and Garrett was relieved to see that the interior was just as good as the exterior, with a dense, even crumb and no signs of underbaking. They each ate a slice with butter, and Garrett found himself surprised by how satisfying the bread was, hearty without being heavy. This will impress my mother, Calla said. Not enough on its own, but combined with everything else you will do, it will matter. Good, Garrett said. He reached across the table to take her hand. Calla, I want you to know that whatever happens with your mother, whatever the clan decides, I am committed to this. To you, I am not going to give up or walk away when things get difficult. I know, Calla said softly. I can see it in your eyes, hear it in your voice. You mean what you say, Garrett Keller. That is one of the things I love about you. The word hung in the air between them, unexpected and enormous. Calla's eyes went wide as she realized what she had said, and Garrett felt his heart begin to hammer in his chest. You love me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Calla's blush was visible even in the low lamplight. I did not mean to say it quite like that, she said. Not yet. But yes, I do. I love you. I think I have been falling in love with you for months, since the first time you asked my opinion on a book you were reading and actually listened to my answer like it mattered. Garrett stood up and pulled her to her feet, cupping her face in his hands. It did matter. Everything you say matters to me. And I love you too, Calla. I love your intelligence and your strength and your kindness. I love the way you see the world and the way you make me want to be better than I am. I love you, and I am going to prove to your mother and your clan that I am worthy of you if it is the last thing I do. He kissed her then, pouring everything he felt into the press of his lips against hers, and she kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms winding around his neck. They stayed like that for a long time, kissing and holding each other while the fire burned low in the stove, and the rain continued its endless drumming on the roof. Eventually, reluctantly, they pulled apart. Calla's lips were swollen and her eyes were bright, and Garrett knew he must look equally affected. They agreed that Calla would take the back room while Garrett made himself a bedroll by the stove, and they said goodnight with one last lingering kiss that made Garrett's toes curl. As he lay on his makeshift bed, listening to the rain and thinking about the woman sleeping in the next room, Garrett felt something settle in his chest, something that felt like certainty. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them. For Calla, he would learn a new culture and win over a hostile matriarch and bridge the divide between their peoples. He would do whatever it took, because she was worth it. They were worth it, and he was not going to let anyone or anything stand in their way. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the storm having blown itself out during the night. Calla's clothes had dried overnight, and she changed back into them while Garrett prepared a simple breakfast of fried eggs and bread. They ate together in comfortable silence, and then Calla prepared to make the journey back to her family's homestead. I will come back tomorrow, she said as Garrett helped her into her coat. The place where the letter had been hidden was now empty, the paper nothing but ashes in the stove. We will start working on the other gifts for my family, and I will arrange for you to come look at the mill. I will be ready, Garrett promised. He kissed her one more time, soft and sweet, and watched from the doorway as she set off down the path toward home. The trading post felt emptier without her presence, but Garrett did not let himself dwell on that. He had work to do. He spent the day taking inventory of his stock and thinking about what gifts might be appropriate for Calla's family. Calla had mentioned that her brothers both had young children, so perhaps toys or books would be welcome. For her mother, something more significant would be needed, something that demonstrated respect and understanding. Calla returned the next afternoon as promised, and they spent several hours discussing gift options. Garrett showed her his stock of imported goods, and together they selected a set of fine carving tools for one of her brothers, who Calla said was an accomplished woodworker, and a collection of herb seeds for the other brother's wife, who maintained the family's medicinal garden. For Mara, Calla suggested something that surprised Garrett, a book. Not just any book, but a specific volume of poetry that had been written by a human scholar who had studied orc culture and traditions with deep respect. The book was expensive and hard to find, but Garrett happened to have a copy in his personal collection, one he had purchased years ago out of curiosity and read cover to cover multiple times. "You would give her one of your own books?" Calla asked, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. "It seems appropriate," Garrett said. "It is something I value, and it demonstrates that I have taken the time to learn about your people even before I knew you. The fact that it is well read shows that it is not just a token gift, but something that has genuinely mattered to me." Calla looked at him with such warmth and affection that Garrett felt his chest tighten. "You continue to surprise me," she said, "in the best ways." They wrapped the gifts carefully and set them aside. Then Calla told him that she had spoken with her brothers, and they had agreed to let Garrett come examine the water mill in 3 days' time. It would be his first visit to the Whitestone homestead, and his first chance to meet some of the clan members who were not Calla. "They will be polite," Calla warned, "but reserved. They will be watching you carefully to see how you conduct yourself. You must be respectful but not servile, confident but not arrogant. Show that you are capable and hardworking, but also humble enough to admit when you do not know something." "That is a lot to balance," Garrett observed. "It is," Calla agreed, "but I believe you can do it." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Garrett worked on his knowledge of orc customs every evening when Calla visited, and during the days, he maintained the trading post and gathered the tools he would need to diagnose the problem with the water mill. He also practiced the greeting gesture until it became second nature, and he worked on moderating his natural directness to something more appropriate for addressing orc elders. On the morning of the mill repair, Garrett woke before dawn and dressed carefully in his best clothes, not fancy, but clean and well-maintained, the kind of outfit that spoke of a man who took pride in his appearance without being vain. He gathered his tools into a canvas bag and set out for the Whitestone homestead, just as the sun was beginning to paint the eastern sky with shades of pink and gold. The Whitestone property was larger than Garrett had expected, with extensive cultivated fields and a substantial main house built of stone and heavy timber. The water mill sat beside a fast-flowing stream that fed down from the high valleys, and even from a distance, Garrett could see that the wheel was turning unevenly, jerking and hesitating in a way that would reduce its efficiency. Calla met him at the edge of the property, emerging from the main house with a smile that made the early morning journey worthwhile. She was dressed in a simple working dress with an apron, and her hair was pulled back in a practical braid. She looked like she belonged here, rooted in this place and these people in a way that made Garrett acutely aware that he was an outsider. But she took his hand and squeezed it, and that simple gesture gave him courage. "My brothers are waiting at the mill," she said. "My mother is in the house. She will not come out to meet you, yet that would imply an acceptance that she has not granted. But she is watching." Garrett glanced at the house and thought he saw a curtain move in one of the upper windows. "Understood. Let us go meet your brothers." The 2 orc men waiting by the mill were clearly related to Calla, with the same dark hair and intelligent eyes, though they were both taller and more heavily built. They stood with their arms crossed, and their expressions were carefully neutral as Garrett approached. "Brothers," Calla said formally, "this is Garrett Keller, the merchant from the Crossroads trading post. Garrett, these are my brothers, Thuron and Vane Whitestone." Garrett executed the respectful greeting Calla had taught him, palms over his heart and a slight bow. "Thank you for allowing me to come help with your mill," he said. "I understand it has been giving you trouble." "It has," the older brother Thuron said. His voice was deep and measured. We have checked the obvious things: the axle, the gears, the water flow. But we cannot determine the cause of the irregular movement. May I examine it? Garrett asked. Thuron gestured toward the mill, and Garrett set down his tool bag and began his inspection. He was aware of the 3 orcs watching him as he worked, but he forced himself to focus on the mechanism in front of him. Years of army training had taught him how to diagnose mechanical problems methodically, and he applied that knowledge now, checking each component in turn. The axle was sound, as Thuron had said. The gears showed normal wear but nothing excessive. The wheel itself was balanced and true. But when Garrett examined the sluice gate that controlled the water flow to the wheel, he found the problem. One of the gate's support brackets had cracked, allowing the gate to shift position slightly under the pressure of the current. The shift was small enough that it was not immediately visible, but it was enough to cause the irregular water flow that was making the wheel jerk. "Here is your problem," Garrett said, pointing out the crack to Thuron and Vane. "The support bracket has failed. It needs to be replaced and the gate needs to be realigned. I can do it if you have some suitable metal stock and access to a forge." The brothers exchanged a glance, and then Vane said, "We have what you need, but the repair will take most of the day." "Are you prepared to stay that long?" "Of course," Garrett said. "I would not leave a job half-finished." What followed was several hours of hot, demanding work. The forge was located in a separate building near the main house, and Garrett worked there under the watchful eyes of Vane, who apparently served as the clan's primary smith. Garrett shaped a new support bracket from a bar of iron, taking care to make it slightly stronger than the original had been, with reinforcing ridges that would better distribute the stress. As he worked, Vane began to ask him questions. Not hostile questions, but probing ones, designed to gauge Garrett's character and intentions. Where had he learned metalworking? What had brought him to the frontier? Why did he run a trading post rather than farm or pursue some other livelihood? Garrett answered honestly, explaining his army background, his decision to leave military life behind, his choice to establish himself in a place where human and orc communities overlapped. He talked about his belief that trade and mutual understanding could build bridges between peoples who had been enemies, and he did not shy away from acknowledging the prejudice and hatred that still existed on both sides. "You speak well," Vane said, watching Garrett hammer the bracket into its final shape, "but words are easy. Actions are what matter." "I agree," Garrett said. "That is why I am here. I am trying to prove through my actions that I am sincere." "And what is it you are trying to prove exactly?" Vane asked. "What do you want from our sister?" Garrett set down his hammer and met Vane's eyes directly. "I want to build a life with her. I want to court her properly according to your customs and earn the right to ask her to marry me. I want to be part of her world, and I want her to be part of mine. And I want your family's blessing, because I know how much Calla values her clan and her kin." Vane studied him for a long moment. "You understand that if our mother refuses to bless this match, most of the clan will follow her lead. You would be taking Calla away from her people if you persist." "I understand," Garrett said. "But I also believe that your mother is capable of being persuaded. Calla believes it too. We are asking for the chance to try." "Then you are either very brave or very foolish," Vane said, echoing Calla's words from days before. "I keep hearing that," Garrett said with a slight smile. "I am starting to think it might be true." Vane did not quite smile back, but something in his expression eased slightly. "Come on," he said. "Let us get that bracket installed before the afternoon gets away from us." The repair took the rest of the day, just as Vane had predicted. They had to drain part of the sluice, remove the damaged bracket, install the new one, realign the gate, and then test the whole system multiple times to ensure it was working properly. By the time the sun was setting and the wheel was turning smoothly and evenly, Garrett was exhausted, covered in soot and metal filings, and deeply satisfied. Thuron and Vane both thanked him for the repair, and this time their thanks seemed genuine rather than merely polite. Calla brought him water to wash with and a clean shirt to replace his ruined one, and she smiled at him with such pride that Garrett felt 10 feet tall despite his exhaustion. "You did well," she said softly, when her brothers had moved away to secure the mill for the night. They were impressed, I could tell. Vane in particular does not give his respect easily, but I think you earned it today. "One down, one to go," Garrett said, glancing toward the house where Mara Whitestone remained conspicuously absent. "She will come soon," Calla said. "Now that you have been here and met my brothers, now that you have proven your practical skills, she will want to confront you herself. I would expect her at the trading post within the next few days." "I will be ready," Garrett said. He wanted to kiss Calla, but they were still within view of the house and her brothers, so he settled for taking her hand and squeezing it gently. "Thank you for believing in me." "Thank you for being worth believing in," Calla replied. Garrett walked back to the trading post in the gathering dusk, his tools slung over his shoulder and his mind already turning to the next challenge. He had won over Calla's brothers, or at least made a good start at it. Now he needed to prepare for Mara Whitestone herself. The next day Calla came to the trading post earlier than usual, her expression worried. "She is coming," she said without preamble. "My mother. Della saw her leave the house this morning, heading in this direction. She will be here within the hour." Garrett felt his heart rate pick up, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Then we had better prepare. What do I need to know?" "Let her speak first," Calla said quickly. "She is the elder, the matriarch. It is her right to set the terms of the conversation. Answer her questions honestly, but do not volunteer information unless asked. Be respectful but not weak, and whatever you do, do not back down from your intentions. If she senses that you can be intimidated or swayed, she will push harder. What if she demands that you stop seeing me?" "Then I will refuse," Calla said steadily. "I am of age and I have the right to choose my own path. She cannot force me to obey, though she can make my life very difficult if I defy her. But that is my decision to make, not yours. Your task is simply to face her with dignity and demonstrate that you are worthy." Garrett pulled her into a quick embrace. "We can do this," he said. "Together." "Together," Calla agreed. They did not have to wait long. Perhaps 20 minutes after Calla's warning, the door to the trading post opened and Mara Whitestone walked in. She was shorter than Garrett had expected, perhaps 5 feet 6 inches tall, but she carried herself with such commanding presence that she seemed to fill the entire room. Her green skin was darker than Calla's, weathered by years of sun and wind, and her black hair was streaked with silver and pulled back in an intricate braid. Her tusks were more prominent than her daughter's, and her eyes were sharp and assessing as they swept over Garrett and then moved to Calla. "Daughter," she said, and her voice was controlled but edged with steel. "I received your message. I understand you chose to ignore my counsel." "Yes, mother," Calla said, stepping forward to stand beside Garrett. "I did. With respect, you made your judgment without meeting Garrett or giving him a chance to prove himself. That is not justice, and it is not in keeping with our traditions." Mara's eyebrows rose. "You dare lecture me on our traditions?" "I dare ask that you honor them fully," Calla said. "Our customs say that a suitor must be judged on his character and his actions, not on his heritage alone. I am asking you to judge Garrett by our standards, not by your prejudices." The room went very quiet. Garrett could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He wanted to step in, to defend Calla, but he understood that this was a moment between mother and daughter, and his role was to wait and let it play out. Mara's expression was unreadable as she studied Calla, and then, very slowly, she nodded. "You are right," she said, and there was a note of something that might have been pride in her voice. "I made my judgment before gathering all the information. That was not fair to you or to this man." She turned her full attention to Garrett, and he felt the weight of her scrutiny like a physical force. "Very well. I will judge you according to our traditions. But understand this, Garrett Keller, I will not be easily satisfied. If I find you lacking in any way, I will not hesitate to say so, and I will do everything in my power to convince my daughter that this match is unwise." "I understand," Garrett said. He executed the respectful greeting and saw Mara's eyes flicker with what might have been approval. "I welcome your judgment, Matriarch Whitestone. I have nothing to hide and everything to prove." "We shall see," Mara said. She moved further into the trading post, her eyes taking in every detail of the space: the well-organized shelves, the clean floors, the evidence of a business run with care and attention. "Calla tells me you fixed our mill." "I did," Garrett said. "The support bracket on the sluice gate had cracked. I replaced it and realigned the gate. The wheel should run smoothly now." "Vane said you did good work. He also said you have a soldier's discipline and a craftsman's eye." Mara picked up a piece of merchandise from a nearby shelf, examining it closely. "Where did you serve?" "In the border wars, 10 years ago," Garrett said. "I was part of the engineering corps, responsible for maintaining fortifications and equipment." "And why did you leave?" "Because I grew tired of building walls and tearing them down," Garrett said honestly. "I wanted to build something that lasted, something that brought people together rather than driving them apart. So I took my pay and bought this trading post." Mara set down the merchandise and turned to face him fully. "Do you know why I wrote that letter? Why I told my daughter to forget you?" "Because I am human," Garrett said. "And because your people and mine have been enemies within your living memory. Because you lost your brother in the war, and you have no reason to trust that any human would treat your daughter with the respect and love she deserves." Mara's eyes widened slightly and she glanced at Calla. "You told him about my brother." "I did," Calla said. "He deserved to know why you feel as you do." "And what do you say to that, Garrett Keller?" Mara asked, her voice challenging. "What do you say to a mother who has watched humans kill her kin and burn her people's homes? Why should I believe you are any different from those who came before you?" Garrett took a breath. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. He needed to be honest, to be vulnerable, to show Mara that he understood the weight of what he was asking. "I cannot erase the past," he said quietly. "I cannot bring back your brother or undo the harm that has been done. I cannot promise that I will never make mistakes or that loving your daughter will always be easy. But I can promise that I see her, truly see her, for the remarkable woman she is. I can promise that I will work every day to be worthy of her, to honor her and her people and the traditions that matter to her. I can promise that I will never take her for granted or treat her as anything less than my equal. And I can promise that I will stand beside her against anyone who tries to harm her or diminish her, whether that person is human or orc." He paused and then added, "I love your daughter, Matriarch Whitestone. I love her intelligence and her strength and her kindness. I love the way she challenges me to be better than I am. And I am asking for the chance to prove to you that I am worthy of her love in return, not because of my heritage, but because of who I am and what I am willing to do." The silence that followed was so complete that Garrett could hear the wind moving through the trees outside. Mara stood very still, her expression giving nothing away, and Garrett forced himself to meet her eyes steadily, to not look away or fidget or show weakness. Finally, Mara spoke. "My daughter loves you," she said. "I can see it in her eyes, hear it in her voice. That matters to me more than you might think. But love alone is not enough to bridge the gap between our peoples. You will face prejudice and hatred from both sides. Your children, if you have them, will be neither fully human nor fully orc, and they will struggle to find their place in a world that does not know what to make of them. Are you prepared for that reality?" "I am," Garrett said. "I am not naive about the challenges we will face. But I believe that we can meet them together, and that what we build will be worth the struggle." Mara nodded slowly. "I see why Calla has chosen you," she said. "You have courage at least and honesty, but courage and honesty are not the same as wisdom or understanding. You say you want to honor our traditions, but what do you truly know of them?" "Very little," Garrett admitted. "But I am learning. Calla has been teaching me, and I am committed to continuing that education for as long as it takes. I have brought gifts, as is your custom." He retrieved the wrapped packages from behind the counter and brought them to Mara. She unwrapped them slowly, examining each item with care. The carving tools and the herb seeds were received with small nods of approval, but when she came to the book of poetry, she paused. "I know this volume," she said, running her fingers over the cover just as Calla had done. "It is rare and expensive. This is one of your own books." "It is," Garrett confirmed. "I have read it many times. It helped me understand your people's culture and history in a way that purely factual accounts never could. I thought you might appreciate it." Mara opened the book and saw the notes Garrett had made in the margins, the passages he had underlined, the evidence of genuine engagement with the text. She read a few of his notes, her expression thoughtful, and then she closed the book carefully. "This is a good gift," she said. "It speaks to who you are better than any words could. You are a scholar as well as a merchant, and you value understanding over assumptions. That is rare in any person, human or orc." "Thank you," Garrett said, feeling a small flicker of hope. Mara set the book aside and fixed him with a piercing stare. "I am going to test you," she said. "Not today, but over the coming weeks. I am going to watch how you conduct yourself, how you treat my daughter, how you interact with our community. I am going to look for any sign of weakness or insincerity or disrespect. And if I find it, I will not hesitate to tell Calla that she is making a mistake." "I would expect nothing less," Garrett said. "But," Mara continued, and now there was the faintest hint of softness in her voice, "I am also going to give you a fair chance. Calla is right. Our traditions require that I judge you on your character and actions, not on your heritage alone. You have made a good start today, Garrett Keller. Do not waste the opportunity." "I will not," Garrett promised. Mara turned to Calla. "I am not giving my blessing yet," she said firmly, "but I am not forbidding this match either. You may continue your courtship, but it will be done properly, according to our customs. Garrett will visit our homestead regularly. He will participate in our family's life, and he will demonstrate through his actions that he is worthy to join our clan. Is that understood?" "Yes, Mother," Calla said, and her voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you." Mara reached out and touched her daughter's cheek, a gesture so tender and unexpected that it made Garrett's throat tighten. "You are my daughter, and I want you to be happy," she said softly. "If this human man can truly make you happy, then I will find a way to accept it, but he must prove himself first." She turned back to Garrett. "You will come to dinner at our homestead 3 days from now. You will meet the rest of the clan, and you will begin to learn what it truly means to be part of an orc family. Come prepared to work, to listen, and to humble yourself." "Understood." "Understood," Garrett said. "I will be there." Mara nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement, and then she swept out of the trading post with the same commanding presence she had brought in. The door closed behind her, and Garrett let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. Calla was on him in an instant, throwing her arms around his neck and laughing and crying at the same time. "You did it," she said. "You faced her and you held your ground and you made her listen. Garrett, you were amazing." "We did it," Garrett corrected, holding her tightly. "We did it together. And we are not done yet. Your mother made it clear that this is just the beginning." "I know," Calla said, pulling back to look at him with shining eyes. "But she is giving us a chance, Garrett. She is actually giving us a chance." I was so afraid she would refuse to even consider it, but she listened. "She saw you for who you are, and she is willing to let you prove yourself. That is more than I dared hope for." "Then we had better make sure I live up to her expectations," Garrett said. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "Tell me everything I need to know about this dinner. What should I bring? How should I dress? What will be expected of me?" They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing for Garrett's formal introduction to the Whitestone clan. Calla explained that the dinner would include not just her immediate family, but also several cousins, aunts, uncles, and their children, perhaps 20 people in all. Garrett would be expected to help with the meal preparation and serving, demonstrating his willingness to contribute to the family's well-being rather than simply being served as a guest. "You will be tested," Calla warned. "The children will be curious and will ask you endless questions. The elders will observe how you interact with them. Your answers need to be honest but also appropriate. You must show that you understand the importance of family and the responsibility of raising children within the clan structure." "I will do my best," Garrett said. He had always liked children, though he had never had any of his own. The idea of becoming part of a large, close-knit family was both intimidating and appealing. Over the next 3 days, Garrett prepared as thoroughly as he could. He practiced cooking several more traditional orc recipes under Calla's guidance, mastering the art of herb-crusted roasted vegetables and a rich meat stew that was apparently a clan favorite. He memorized the names and relationships of all the family members he would be meeting, studying the family tree Calla drew for him until he could recite it from memory. He also spent time thinking about what he wanted from this relationship beyond simply being with Calla. He realized that he was not just courting a woman, he was asking to be adopted into an entirely different culture. That was a profound undertaking, one that would require him to change and grow in ways he could not fully anticipate. But as he thought about it, he found that the prospect excited him rather than frightening him. He had been alone for so long, operating on the margins of both human and orc society. The idea of belonging, truly belonging, to a community and a family was something he had not known he wanted until Calla had shown him it was possible. The day of the dinner arrived, and Garrett dressed in his best clothes and made the journey to the Whitestone homestead with a basket of fresh bread and a jug of honey he had purchased from a human beekeeper down the valley. The sun was setting as he arrived, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, and he could hear the sounds of laughter and conversation coming from inside the house. Calla met him at the door, looking beautiful in a deep blue dress with silver embroidery at the collar and sleeves. "Are you ready?" she asked. "As ready as I will ever be," Garrett said. He offered her his arm, and together they walked into the house. The main room of the Whitestone home was large and warm, with a long table set for the feast and a cooking fire crackling in the massive stone hearth. Orcs of all ages filled the space, children running and playing, adults talking and laughing, elders sitting in the places of honor near the fire. The noise was overwhelming at first, a cacophony of voices and movement that made Garrett acutely aware of how different this was from his quiet, solitary life at the trading post. But then Mara was there, calling for quiet, and the room settled into an expectant hush. All eyes turned to Garrett, and he felt the weight of their scrutiny like a physical thing. "Family," Mara said, her voice carrying easily across the room. "This is Garrett Keller, the human merchant who has been courting our Calla. He has asked for the chance to prove himself worthy of joining our clan, and I've agreed to give him that chance. He will be sharing our meal tonight and participating in our family traditions. I expect you all to treat him with the courtesy due to a potential clan member, but also to observe him carefully and judge for yourselves whether he is truly suitable." There was a murmur of conversation, some approving, some skeptical, but no open hostility. Garrett took that as a good sign. Mara gestured for him to come forward. "Garrett Keller, do you come before this clan with honest intentions and a willing heart?" "I do," Garrett said clearly, executing the respectful greeting he had practiced so many times. "Then you are welcome in our home," Mara said. "Help us prepare the feast, and let us get to know you." What followed was several hours of the most intense social interaction Garrett had experienced in years. He was put to work immediately, helping to carry heavy pots and serving dishes, arranging food on platters, pouring drinks for the elders. He was careful to stay alert and anticipate needs, to be useful without being obtrusive, to show that he could work as part of a team. As the meal was served and everyone settled at the long table, Garrett found himself seated between two of Calla's cousins, both young orc women who peppered him with questions about his trading post, his travels, his experiences in the war. He answered as honestly as he could, neither boasting nor downplaying his past, and he made sure to ask them about their own lives and interests in return. The food was excellent, hearty and flavorful, and Garrett made sure to compliment the cooks and express his appreciation for being included. As the meal progressed, he noticed that the atmosphere was gradually becoming more relaxed. People were smiling at him more, including him in conversations more naturally. Even the children, who had initially been shy around the strange human, were starting to approach him with questions and observations. One little girl, perhaps 6 years old, climbed onto the bench beside him and announced, "You are very tall." "I am," Garrett agreed solemnly. "And you are very observant." "My name is Rena," the girl said. "I am Thuron's daughter." "Are you going to marry Aunt Calla, Rena?" Thuron said from across the table, his voice warning. But Garrett smiled at the girl and said, "I hope so. If your Aunt Calla will have me and if your family decides I am worthy. What do you think? Should I be allowed to marry her?" Rena considered this very seriously. "Can you tell stories?" she asked. "I can," Garrett said. "Not as well as a professional storyteller, but I know a few good ones." "Then I think you should marry her," Rena declared. "We need someone who can tell stories at family gatherings. Uncle Vane only knows stories about blacksmithing, and those are boring." There was a burst of laughter from around the table, and Vane threw a piece of bread at his niece, who giggled and ducked. The moment broke some final barrier of tension, and after that the evening flowed smoothly. After the meal, Garrett volunteered to help with the cleanup, and he found himself working side by side with several clan members in the kitchen area, washing dishes and storing leftovers. The work was companionable, filled with easy conversation and occasional jokes at each other's expense. Garrett felt himself relaxing into the rhythm of it, enjoying the sense of being part of something larger than himself. When the cleanup was finished, Mara called everyone back to the main room for what she described as the evening's entertainment. Garrett was not sure what to expect, but it turned out to be a combination of music, storytelling, and what appeared to be a competitive game involving throwing small wooden rings at a target across the room. Garrett was invited to participate in the ring game, and though he did not win, he acquitted himself reasonably well and managed to make everyone laugh when he accidentally hit one of the rafters instead of the target, and the ring came bouncing back to land on his own head. As the evening wound down and families began gathering their children to head home, Mara approached Garrett. "Walk with me," she said, and it was not a request. They went outside into the cool night air, leaving Calla in the house with her brothers. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by any nearby settlement, and the sound of the stream rushing past the mill was a constant background murmur. "You did well tonight," Mara said without preamble. "You worked hard, you were respectful, you engaged with everyone from the elders to the children. You showed humility without being weak, and you clearly made an effort to fit in rather than expecting us to accommodate you." "Thank you," Garrett said. "Your family is wonderful. I can see why Calla is so proud to be a Whitestone." "But," Mara continued, as if he had not spoken, "there is a difference between being a pleasant guest for one evening and actually joining a clan. What you experienced tonight was the easy part, Garrett. The hard part is the daily work of being part of a family, the compromises, the conflicts, the times when you will be expected to put the clan's needs ahead of your own desires. Are you truly prepared for that?" "I do not know," Garrett said honestly. "I have been alone for most of my adult life. I am used to making my own decisions and living by my own rules. Becoming part of a clan will require me to change in ways I probably cannot fully anticipate, but I am willing to try. For Calla, I am willing to learn and adapt and become whatever I need to be." Mara was quiet for a moment, looking out at the dark fields. "My daughter has never been conventional," she said finally. "Even as a child, she asked questions that had no easy answers. She wanted to understand why things were the way they were, not just accept them. When she started going to your trading post, I knew something was developing between you. I saw the way she lit up when she talked about your conversations, the way she found excuses to make the journey even when we did not truly need supplies." She turned to face Garrett, and in the starlight her expression was softer than he had ever seen it. "I wrote that letter because I was afraid that she would be hurt, afraid that you would prove to be unworthy, afraid that she would choose you over her family and I would lose her. But watching you tonight, seeing the way you look at her and the way you interact with our clan, I realized that my fears were unfair to both of you. I will never ask Calla to choose between me and her family," Garrett said quietly. "I want to be part of her world, not replace it. I want to join your clan, not take her away from it." "I believe you," Mara said, "and that is why I am going to give you my provisional blessing to continue this courtship." "Provisional," she emphasized, "meaning that I reserve the right to withdraw it if I see anything that concerns me. But for now, you have demonstrated enough to earn my cautious approval." Garrett felt a wave of relief and gratitude so intense it nearly buckled his knees. "Thank you, Matriarch Whitestone. I will not let you down." "See that you do not," Mara said, but she was almost smiling as she said it. They walked back to the house together, and when they entered, Calla looked up from where she had been talking with Thuron and Vane. Her eyes went immediately to her mother's face, and whatever she saw there made her own face light up with joy. Mara crossed to her daughter and took both her hands. "I am giving him a chance," she said. "A real chance. He is a good man, Calla. I do not say this lightly, but I believe he may truly be worthy of you." Calla threw her arms around her mother, and the two women held each other tightly while Garrett watched with a lump in his throat. This was what family looked like, he realized. This was what it meant to belong. And he was being offered a chance to become part of it. When mother and daughter finally separated, Calla came to Garrett and took his hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for being patient, for being respectful, for being exactly who you are." "Thank you for believing I could be," Garrett replied. Thuron and Vane approached then, and Vane extended his hand to Garrett in the human fashion. "Welcome to the family," he said gruffly. "Provisionally, as our mother said, but welcome nonetheless." Garrett shook his hand, then Thuron's, feeling the warmth of acceptance in their grips. "I will do my best to be worthy of that welcome," he promised. The next several weeks passed in a blur of activity and learning. Garrett continued to run his trading post, but he also spent several days each week at the Whitestone homestead, working alongside the family and learning their ways. He helped with the harvest, bringing in the grain and vegetables that would see the clan through the winter. He learned to weave basic patterns on Calla's loom, producing rough cloth that would never be sold but which demonstrated his willingness to try new skills. He spent hours with the children, telling them stories and answering their endless questions about human culture and customs. He also continued to court Calla properly, according to orc traditions. They went on long walks through the autumn fields, always chaperoned by one of her family members as custom dictated. They worked together on various projects, learning each other's rhythms and preferences. They talked about everything: their hopes for the future, their fears about the challenges they would face, their dreams of the life they might build together. As the season turned toward winter, Garrett realized that he had been absorbed into the Whitestone clan in a way that felt natural and right. He was invited to family gatherings without question. His opinions were sought on clan matters, at least the minor ones. The children called him Uncle Garrett, even though he was not yet formally part of the family. And Mara had stopped watching him with quite so much intensity, though he knew she was still evaluating him. One evening in late autumn, as Garrett was preparing to leave the homestead after a long day of helping winterize the outbuildings, Mara called him aside. "I have been thinking," she said, "about what the formal joining ceremony should look like. Traditionally, when an outsider marries into a clan, the ceremony includes elements that honor both the individual's original community and their new family. In your case, that would mean incorporating both human and orc traditions into the rites." Garrett's heart began to pound. "Are you saying—" "I am saying that I believe you have proven yourself," Mara said. "You have worked hard, you have learned our ways, and most importantly, you have made my daughter happier than I have seen her in years. If you wish to ask for her hand, you have my blessing to do so." "I do wish it," Garrett said immediately. "More than anything." "Then you need to learn how to ask properly," Mara said. "In our tradition, the proposal is a formal ritual that takes place in front of the entire clan. The suitor must state his intentions clearly and make promises regarding how he will honor and protect his chosen partner. He must also present a token, not a ring as humans do, but a piece of craftswork that demonstrates his skills and his commitment." "What kind of craftswork?" Garrett asked. "That is for you to decide," Mara said. "It should be something meaningful, something that required significant effort to create. Many suitors make jewelry, but I have seen everything from carved furniture to woven tapestries to forged tools. The point is to demonstrate that you are willing to invest time and care into creating something beautiful for your partner." Garrett nodded slowly, his mind already turning over possibilities. He had some metalworking skills from his army days, and he had access to good materials through his trading connections. "How long do I have?" "The first snow is coming," Mara said, looking up at the darkening sky. "It would be traditional to hold the ceremony at the winter solstice, when the clan gathers to celebrate the turning of the year. That gives you about 6 weeks. "I can work with that," Garrett said. "Then get to work," Mara said. "And Garrett, thank you for proving me wrong." I am glad that my daughter found you. I am glad I found her, Garrett replied. Over the next 6 weeks, Garrett worked on his proposal token in secret, using the forge in his small workshop behind the trading post. He decided to make Calla a necklace, but not a simple one. He forged a pendant in the shape of 2 hands clasped together, one clearly human and one clearly orc, with fingers intertwined in a grip of partnership and equality. Around the joined hands, he worked a delicate border of silver filigree, incorporating symbols from both human and orc traditions: the oak tree that represented strength in human culture, the river that represented continuity in orc mythology. It was painstaking work, requiring all his skill and patience. He ruined 3 attempts before he got the proportions right, and the filigree alone took him a week of careful, meticulous labor. But when it was finally finished, polished to a high shine and hung on a fine chain, he felt a surge of pride. It was beautiful, meaningful, and clearly made with love and care. He hoped Calla would see all of that when he presented it to her. As the winter solstice approached, Garrett helped the Whitestone clan prepare for the celebration. It would be a major event, with extended family traveling from across the region to attend. There would be feasting and music and storytelling, and in the midst of it all, Garrett would make his formal proposal. He was nervous in a way he had not been even when facing Mara for the first time. What if Calla said no? What if, despite everything, she decided that the challenges of an interspecies relationship were too much to bear? What if the clan, having watched him for weeks, decided at the last moment that he was not truly suitable? But whenever these fears threatened to overwhelm him, he thought about Calla's smile, the sound of her laugh, the way she fit perfectly in his arms. He thought about the life they could build together, bridging 2 worlds and creating something new and beautiful. And he found the courage to keep moving forward. The night of the winter solstice arrived cold and clear, with stars blazing overhead like diamonds on black velvet. The Whitestone great room had been transformed for the celebration, with evergreen boughs hanging from the rafters and candles burning everywhere, filling the air with the scent of beeswax and pine. Garrett arrived early to help with the preparations, and Calla met him at the door with a kiss that made his head spin. "Are you ready?" she asked. "Terrified," Garrett admitted. "But ready." "Good," Calla said, "because I am terrified too, and it helps to know I am not alone." "You will never be alone again," Garrett promised. "Not if I have anything to say about it." As the evening progressed and the great room filled with clan members and their guests, Garrett found himself swept up in the celebration. There was music and dancing, food and drink, laughter and warmth. He was no longer an outsider looking in, but a part of it all, welcomed and accepted. When the moment came for formal announcements, Mara stood and called for quiet. The room settled quickly, all eyes turning to the matriarch. "We have come together on this longest night to celebrate our clan, our traditions, and our hope for the future," Mara said. "Tonight we have a special announcement. Garrett Keller, please step forward." Garrett's heart was hammering as he moved to stand before Mara. Calla was already there, standing beside her mother, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Garrett Keller," Mara said formally, "you have asked for the chance to court my daughter according to our traditions. You have worked alongside our clan, learned our ways, and demonstrated through your actions that you are a man of character and integrity. Do you now wish to make a formal proposal of marriage before this clan?" "I do," Garrett said, his voice carrying clearly across the suddenly silent room. "Then speak," Mara said, stepping back to allow Garrett to approach Calla directly. Garrett took a deep breath and began the ritual words Mara had taught him, speaking in the formal orc dialect rather than the common tongue. "Calla Whitestone, I stand before you and your clan to ask for your hand in marriage. I promise to honor you as my equal and partner. I promise to work beside you to build a life of meaning and joy. I promise to respect your traditions and your people, and to raise any children we may have with knowledge of both their heritages. I promise to stand with you against any challenge, to be your shelter in storms and your companion in sunshine. And I promise to love you with all that I am, for as long as I live. He pulled out the necklace he had made, holding it up so the pendant caught the candlelight. I made this for you as a token of my commitment. 2 hands, one human and one orc, joined in partnership. That is what I offer you, Calla, a partnership of equals, a blending of our 2 worlds into something new and beautiful. Tears were streaming down Calla's face now, but she was smiling. Yes, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Yes, Garrett Keller, I will marry you. I will build a life with you and face whatever challenges come our way. I will be your partner and your equal, and I will love you for all my days. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Garrett stepped forward and fastened the necklace around Calla's neck, his hands trembling slightly. Then he pulled her into his arms and kissed her while their entire family whooped and celebrated around them. When they finally broke apart, Mara stepped forward and placed one hand on Garrett's shoulder and one on Calla's. By the authority granted to me as matriarch of the Whitestone clan, she said, I recognize this betrothal and give it my full blessing. Garrett Keller, you are now considered a member of our clan in all but formal ceremony. Welcome home. Welcome home, the room echoed, and Garrett felt something settle in his chest, something warm and right and complete. The rest of the evening passed in a joyful blur. Garrett was congratulated by what felt like every person in the room, many of whom offered advice or teasing comments about married life. The children demanded to see the necklace up close and declared it very shiny and very good. Thuron and Vane both embraced him and called him brother, and even the elders who had been most skeptical of him offered their approval. Late in the evening, when the celebration had mellowed into small clusters of conversation and sleepy children, Garrett and Calla slipped outside for a moment alone. They walked to the stream by the mill, now running quietly under a skim of ice, and stood together looking up at the stars. I cannot believe this is real, Calla said softly. I cannot believe we actually did it. We did, Garrett said, wrapping his arms around her from behind and resting his chin on top of her head. We faced down prejudice and fear and all the forces that tried to keep us apart, and we won. Together, Calla agreed. She turned in his arms to face him. The wedding will be at the spring equinox, my mother says. That gives us 3 months to plan the ceremony and make arrangements for our life together. Where will we live? The trading post is yours, but it is small for a family. We will figure it out, Garrett said. Maybe we can expand the trading post, add a proper living space, or maybe we can build something new, a home that is uniquely ours. We have time to decide. We do, Calla said. She touched the pendant at her throat, tracing the joined hands with her fingertips. This is beautiful, Garrett. I will treasure it always. It is a promise, Garrett said. A reminder that we are stronger together than we could ever be apart. They stood there for a long time, holding each other under the winter stars, and Garrett felt a peace he had not known since he was a child. He had found his place in the world, found his purpose and his partner. And he knew with absolute certainty that whatever challenges the future brought, they would face them together. The months between the betrothal and the wedding passed quickly, filled with preparations and plans. Garrett worked with Vane to expand the trading post, adding a second floor that would serve as living quarters and incorporating design elements from both human and orc architecture. The project became a kind of community effort, with various clan members stopping by to help with construction or offer advice on everything from window placement to furniture arrangement. Calla worked on creating textiles for their new home, weaving beautiful hangings and blankets that incorporated patterns from both their cultures. She also began teaching Garrett more advanced aspects of orc language and customs, preparing him for his role as a full clan member. They faced some opposition, of course. There were humans in the nearby settlements who muttered about Garrett betraying his kind, and there were orcs in more traditional clans who saw the Whitestone's acceptance of a human as weakness or foolishness. But the Whitestone clan closed ranks around them, and Mara made it clear that anyone who wanted to challenge the match would have to go through her first. After that, the criticism mostly subsided into occasional grumbling that both Garrett and Calla learned to ignore. As the spring equinox approached, the wedding preparations reached a fever pitch. The ceremony would take place at the Whitestone homestead, in the great room where Garrett had first shared a meal with Calla's family. It would incorporate traditions from both cultures. A human priest and an orc elder would officiate together. The vows would be spoken in both languages, and the celebration would include music and food from both peoples. On the morning of the wedding, Garrett woke in his room at the trading post feeling a mixture of excitement and nerves. Thuron and Vane arrived early to help him prepare, bringing with them the traditional orc wedding garments that Garrett would wear for the ceremony, a long tunic of deep green embroidered with silver thread, paired with dark trousers and soft leather boots. "You are sure about this?" Vane asked as he helped Garrett with the complicated fastenings on the tunic. "Last chance to run." "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," Garrett said. "Good answer," Thuron said with a grin. "Because Calla would hunt you down if you tried to run, and believe me, you do not want to be on the receiving end of her anger." They made the journey to the Whitestone homestead together, and Garrett found the property transformed. Flowers had been brought in from greenhouses and arranged everywhere, filling the air with the scent of spring. Ribbons and banners in the Whitestone clan colors hung from every available surface, and tables had been set up outside to accommodate all the guests. Inside the great room, Garrett took his place at the front beside the two officiants, a human priest from a nearby settlement who had agreed to participate, and an orc elder who served as the spiritual leader for several clans in the region. The room was packed with people, humans and orcs mingling together in a way that would have been unthinkable just a year ago. Then the music started, and Calla appeared in the doorway. She was breathtaking. Her dress was a masterpiece of orc weaving, a deep blue that brought out the green tones in her skin, with intricate silver embroidery that caught the light with every movement. Her hair was arranged in an elaborate style, woven with flowers and silver threads, and she wore the necklace Garrett had made for her prominently at her throat. But it was her smile that truly took Garrett's breath away. It was radiant, full of joy and love and anticipation, and it was directed entirely at him. Mara walked beside her daughter, and when they reached the front of the room, she placed Calla's hand in Garrett's with a solemn nod. "Take care of my daughter," she said quietly, only loud enough for Garrett to hear. "With my life," Garrett promised. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything Garrett had ever experienced. The human priest and the orc elder took turns speaking, weaving together traditions and beliefs that complemented each other in surprising ways. Garrett and Calla exchanged vows in both common tongue and orc dialect, promising to honor and cherish each other, to build a life together that respected both their heritages, to face the future with courage and hope. When it came time to exchange tokens, Garrett gave Calla a ring in the human fashion, a simple band of silver engraved with orc symbols of partnership and eternity. Calla gave him a woven bracelet in the orc tradition, made with threads she had dyed and spun herself, incorporating colors that held meaning in her culture: green for growth, blue for loyalty, silver for wisdom. And then the officiants pronounced them married, joined in the sight of both their peoples, and Garrett kissed his wife for the first time as her husband. The room erupted in cheers and applause, and Garrett pulled Calla close, holding her tightly while their families celebrated around them. The feast that followed was magnificent, with dishes from both human and orc cuisines spread across the tables in abundance. There was music and dancing, toasts and speeches, laughter and occasional tears. Garrett found himself passed from one group to another, accepting congratulations and good wishes from people he had never met before, all of whom seemed genuinely happy for the newly married couple. As the sun began to set, and the celebration showed no signs of slowing, Garrett and Calla slipped away for a moment of quiet. They walked to their favorite spot by the stream, now flowing freely with snowmelt, and stood together watching the water rush past. "We did it," Calla said softly. "We are actually married. You are my husband." "And you are my wife," Garrett said, still marveling at the truth of it. "Calla Keller. How does that sound?" "Perfect," Calla said. "Though technically, in orc tradition, I would keep my clan name and you would take it as well. So we would both be Whitestones." "Garrett Whitestone," Garrett said, testing it out. "I like it. It feels like I really am part of the family now." "You are," Calla said. "In every way that matters, you are. And soon we will start our own family, build our own traditions, create something that is uniquely ours." "I cannot wait," Garrett said. He kissed her again, slow and sweet, and felt her melt against him. They returned to the celebration eventually, and danced and ate and talked with their guests until the stars were bright overhead, and the children had all been carried home sleeping. Finally, as the last guests were departing and the clan members were beginning to clean up, Mara approached them. "Go," she said, shooing them away. "We will handle this. You two have a new life to begin." Garrett and Calla took her advice, walking together through the moonlit fields to the trading post where they would spend their first night as husband and wife. The expansion was complete, the second floor furnished and ready, and as they climbed the stairs together, Garrett felt a sense of rightness settle over him. This was home. Not just the building, but the woman beside him, the life they were beginning together. This was what he had been searching for without knowing it: a place to belong, a person to love, a future worth building. They stood together at the window of their new bedroom, looking out over the land that straddled the border between human and orc territories, a place where two worlds met and mingled. "What are you thinking?" Calla asked, leaning against his shoulder. "I am thinking that I am the luckiest man alive," Garrett said. "I am thinking that I cannot wait to see what we build together. I am thinking that I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Calla said, "and I am thinking the exact same things." They turned from the window and toward each other, toward their new life together, toward a future full of possibility and promise. And as Garrett took his wife in his arms, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, two people from different worlds who had found a way to create their own. The seasons turned, and life settled into a new rhythm for Garrett and Calla. The expanded trading post thrived, becoming known as a place where humans and orcs could meet and trade in safety and mutual respect. Garrett's reputation grew as a fair merchant and a bridge between communities, and he found himself mediating disputes and facilitating connections that would have been impossible just a few years earlier. Calla continued her weaving, creating beautiful textiles that were sought after by both human and orc customers. She also began teaching, sharing her skills with anyone who wanted to learn, and her classes became a gathering place for people from both cultures to work together and build understanding. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. There were still those who disapproved of their union, still moments of prejudice and misunderstanding. But they faced each challenge together, supporting each other through the difficult times and celebrating the victories. And slowly, steadily, they watched as attitudes began to shift, as their example inspired others to question old hatreds and consider new possibilities. Near the end of their first year together, Calla came to Garrett with news that made his heart soar. She was pregnant, carrying their first child. The announcement was met with joy from the Whitestone clan, and even from some of the human settlements nearby. Their child would be a symbol of what was possible when people chose love over fear, unity over division. When the baby was born in the summer, a healthy boy with his father's brown eyes and his mother's green skin, they named him Finian Whitestone. He was loved from his first breath by both sides of his family, welcomed as a new beginning and a promise of hope for the future. As Garrett held his son for the first time, looking into those bright, curious eyes, he thought back to the day he had found the letter in Calla's coat, the letter that had told her to forget him. The letter he had burned without reading, choosing instead to hold her close and fight for their future. It had been the right choice. Everything that had followed the courtship, the challenges, the wedding, and now this perfect child in his arms had proven that beyond any doubt. Love was worth fighting for, understanding was worth working for, and a life built on mutual respect and genuine partnership was worth any sacrifice. Calla came to stand beside him, looking down at their son with tears of joy in her eyes. "What do you think he will be?" she asked softly. "What kind of person will he become?" "He will be himself," Garrett said. "Not fully human, not fully orc, but something new and wonderful. And he will grow up knowing that he is loved, that he belongs to two communities, and that differences can be strengths rather than weaknesses. We will teach him that." "We will," Calla agreed. She leaned her head against Garrett's shoulder, and they stood together looking at their son, feeling the weight of their responsibility and the joy of their accomplishment. This was their legacy, Garrett thought. Not just this child, but everything they had built together. The bridge between communities, the example they had set, the proof that love could overcome prejudice and fear. It was a beginning, not an ending. There would be more work to do, more battles to fight, more hearts and minds to change. But they would do it together, as they had always done. And that, Garrett knew with absolute certainty, was more than enough. Outside, the summer sun shone down on the trading post that had become a home, on the fields where two communities came together in peace, on the future that stretched out bright and full of possibility. And inside, a family stood together, human and orc, bound by love and commitment and hope. It was exactly where they were meant to be.